Good morning and good afternoon to all of our merry Marvelites. Welcome to Marvel Movie Talk right here on Geekscape. So happy to be with each and every one of you out there. I see the live chat is already a buzz, as they say. As always, I'm Christian Blatt, joined by Nate Miller.
That's me.
Yeah, try pointing to the person in the box next to you, everybody at home. And this one's easy.
Oh.
I'll take Alf for the block. Also, Ann B. Davis in the center square, our very own Count Eric Connor. Eric, thank you.
Thank you, and thank all of you. A buzz in the private chat, in our chat.
Not with us today, our pal Michael Shirley, because he has no electricity. And not only is he trying to save food from his refrigerator, he was not able to watch the show, nor is he able to connect to the internet. So we hope he's well. But if his parents are watching without him, it's great to see you both, the Shirleys. I would like to start with fun, exciting news for people who maybe don't get out to the movies. And I have a friend who he had his first baby back in April, and I know he hasn't seen this movie, so I told him as soon as I got the press release. That's right, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 will be on Disney Plus August 2nd. That's so soon. And we did a number of review shows for that. There are a couple on this channel on Geekscape, and then also some on my Blackcast YouTube channel. So if you want to see the movie and then check out what we thought about it when we saw it in the theater a few months ago, go right ahead. Check it out. You are welcome to. But I think in general, people liked it. They were happy. It was a good exit for James Gunn, but we'll be seeing these characters again. I think everybody kind of expects. So that's good news. Well, you know what? I did see it in the theater twice. I didn't go a third time, and now I definitely don't have to because I like these small windows before it turns up on the streaming service. But you don't want it to be too small. You want the studio to feel like a movie was a success before it ends up on a streaming service a couple weeks later. So excited for that. At some point, I will definitely rewatch. Nate, Eric, I'll ask you both in order. Do you have any plans for a rewatch once this movie arrives in your home?
I don't have any plans. I will probably watch it at some point.
Yeah.
Nate, you said we were going to go to Red Lobster and then watch Guardians.
Hey, I told you not to tell Christian because he's going to get jealous.
Well, I'm free, guys. I can come over. I'll be there.
I don't think his microphone's working. Don't worry, he can't hear us.
No, that's embarrassing. Knowing you, Eric, you'll just show up. I'll see a picture of you at Red Lobster with Nate and Tukey. Craig Robinson checking in from across the pond. Hey, all. Great to see Craig, Daniel, Cami, anybody else in the chat. Introduce yourself. Say hello, but we're glad to have everyone there. So I wanted to start with fun, happy, coming to America. No, I wanted to start with some news about a movie that is going to be on Disney Plus. Meaning at some point there'll be something on Disney Plus that's Marvel that we can all be excited about. I also, as we very rarely do on this show, wanted to get some headlines from Forbes for reasons that tie into getting tax breaks in the UK. Disney had to explain just how much money they spent on their projects. $212 million on Secret Invasion. Nate, I ask you first. Where do you think that money went? Do you think they had an extensive catering budget?
Yeah.
I don't know that I've seen it on the screen.
Maybe it was flying Samuel L. Jackson back and forth between the 8 other projects that he's doing. Or you know what? It probably all went to Emilia Clarke. Like, let's be honest.
I mean, that would make sense. And by the way, if Sam Jackson's doing like a Snakes on a Plane prequel, I think it's worth it to work around his schedule. And by the way, there's a follow-up article from over on Forbes just a day later. It makes no sense. Marvel's Secret Invasion has a $212 million budget. And then in the article, they start to kind of ask a lot of the same questions I did, which is, where was that money spent? But also, Bob Iger had said earlier this week, too many Marvel series on Disney Plus, which had diluted focus and attention. I don't know that I felt like before this there were too many series, but Eric, I wanted to get your thoughts on that price tag, $212 million.
I guess parking in Georgia and Canada is really expensive because it's definitely not on the screen. I mean, my guess would have been maybe 10 million an episode, maybe
an episode. Yeah, I think I it feels that way, but especially because there's so many
30
tax
to
breaks.
40. I know.
Yeah.
I mean, Samuel L. Jackson, I'm sure gets a nice hefty paycheck, but there's not really high priced talent in there beyond him, and then the effects is pretty minimal. They haven't had particularly expensive looking like set pieces, action scenes. So I'm stunned, and then I think this is going to become maybe then like now that they've announced the cost, it's going to be. Remember the movie Sahara with Matthew McConaughey? Disney did.
Oh
that
yeah,
one
I
too.
was awake for some of that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and apparently the accountants were awake all night creating all sorts of new categories, including one that was like bribing local officials. It was actually categorized that way. So that was another one where the price tag was absurd when you saw the film, and then they broke it down. Like Matthew McConaughey had a private chef that like got a couple $1 million. So the money's somewhere, but we sure as heck ain't seeing it.
Yeah, and look, we're going to talk about the episode. We'll go into it. It's just I saw that earlier this week, and I'm on a text thread with our fearless leader over here at Geekscape, Jonathan London, Garrett Briones, and a few other people, Ian Kerner, and this was a very heated conversation. We all agreed. It was just more of one of those things where we're all like, I mean, how? I mean, it can't be the marketing, I mean, they didn't really do that much.
No.
But
I saw
Go
behind the
ahead.
scenes thing a couple days ago that was like an examination of one of the shots that was Sam Jackson just like sitting in a chair in a room having a conversation with one of the characters on the show, and it revealed that the whole background was green screen, and like 3/4 of the gun that he was holding in his hand were also like plated in. The gun wasn't even fully assembled on set, and so there was. Let me see if I can find it. But there was a bunch of like.
I definitely want to see that. So let us know if you can see that. And well, let me just say, when you use a lot of green screen, movies tend to feel a little soulless. We're not here to bag on the Star Wars prequels, but when you see that a lot of that stuff was on sound stages and blue and green screen, Daniel has a theory. Maybe Groot arms are too expensive. That would make a lot of sense. And I'm sorry, what did you want to say, Eric?
No, there was a Funny or Die sketch that was it imitated those FX breakdown shorts that are usually pretty cool. Except this one was for the movie Carol, which was that drama with Rooney Mara and Cate Blanchett. And the joke is,
I thought it was the Captain Marvel prequel that we've all been hoping for.
That's Carol D. This is just Carol, and the joke of it is that none of it was green screen, but they like had a scene of her like just sitting at a counter, and the joke is like everything is green screen, like it's not even Cate Blanchett, and it's like and so but when you're describing that, Nate, this idea that he's just sitting there and everything was like things that were so easy to not green screen were green screen, that's when also smells like maybe there were just problems left and right. And
I have to make a correction.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
On doing some more research, I found the photo. It turns out it is actually from Far From Home and not from Secret Invasion. So, and it was
still
because
interesting.
He was not available because of shooting schedule. But still, I would imagine that there are still situations in this show where some things were CG'd that probably didn't have to be, and that probably adds to that budget. Because I was reading that She-Hulk was like $250 million. So, like this show being 212. just doesn't make sense.
There might have been a
She-Hulk was
lot of
more
problems,
episodes,
too.
right? She-Hulk was like 9 episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or it's
And
More
more
episodes,
more
CG
consistent
character.
CG. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just that first episode having to have Bruce in it, and him change, and you need that to look a certain way. You can knock the CG in She-Hulk, and many people have, but it still costs a lot of money to do.
Maybe this is
Eric,
a sign that the finale is going to be absolutely crazy. Like
yeah,
they're
right.
gonna like
They
Rhodey's gonna show up in a War Machine suit, and like Captain Marvel's gonna fly down with Spectrum, and they're gonna have a huge like
What-
energy battle in the middle
what-
of New York City.
Yeah, what if they spent $209 million on the episode 6? That would actually make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? Eric, I wanted to give you a chance. I feel like you were trying to finish your point, as always on this show.
Sorry.
Oh,
No, that's nothing to do with you. It's me.
It's all we all know who's to blame. Yeah, I remember there was all these like reports of like problems with Secret Invasion and like reshoots and whatnot. That might explain some of that
Sure.
budget if they had to scrap like I don't know the original pilot if they had to replace actors, but it's still that number is so absurd. So I mean now I feel like we're about to go down the rabbit hole of like how the heck did this movie cost so much?
Yeah,
if-
and by the
and
way,
I think we
stop
could find a line
using the
producer.
clip from the first episode of Colby Smulders getting shot. Every time you do that, you have to pay her.
Yeah,
Stop. We get it.
Special-
Like, just
and
show
give
it
her a
from another
special
angle. She had a special appearance in this credit, and I'm like, save the money. What are you doing?
It's probably in her contract that there's a minimum amount of the episodes that she has to be involved in,
might
and
be
their
it.
way around that was just showing her dying over and over again.
Before we dive into the episode proper, I do need to give propers, as it were, to our pal Craig from across the pond. Right after we finished the show last week, Craig Robinson made the point on Twitter. Not sure if you picked it up, but at the beginning of the flashback, Fury was described as having a powerful sense of righteousness, which took him back to a scene from Pulp Fiction. And I was very upset that we didn't catch it. And Eric spent every day since last episode in solitary confinement because you should have brought that to our attention. But we appreciate the fact that Craig was able to bring that to
where
us.
I stumble, Craig flies.
Yeah, right, exactly. Cam Egan's got a theory. Maybe just it's a big price tag for Olivia Colman. Very upset that Michael can't be with us. Obviously, in general, we always enjoy his feedback and his thoughts, but he's like the number one Olivia Colman stan on this show, and he doesn't get to talk about what I felt like was her best episode so far. She had stuff to do. She shot somebody. So we don't want to harp on our disappointment on this show. I'm going to continue to have high expectations for episode 6. Every week I push my expectations a week further down the road. It can't go beyond this, but if you want any indication that maybe mentally I've moved on from Secret Invasion, my background is indeed from the poster for the Marvels, because I'm already like, all right, just set that up and we'll see what's going on. Nate, I'd like to start with you. You can start with any aspects of this episode. You could start with the good, but if we want to start with the not as good, that is entirely up to you, sir.
Well, since we're discussing Olivia Colman, her scenes were by far my favorite of the episode. And as I was watching her, I was thinking, like her character and her scenes have had the actual spy elements that like this show and the main characters and main plot are almost entirely missing. I think she comes off way more badass and efficient and like good at her job than Fury does. Like at any point in the whole series, like at most we get is this implication of Nick showing up at the end of things and like kind of puppeteering stuff, but we never really see it. Whereas like here we see her not only, hands-on dealing with these problems she's investigating, but also like ruthlessly executing people that she has done the research to know who they are. That was the coolest part for me. Other than that, the Gravik fight scene was cool too, but also just kind of felt, I don't know, that turn of him in this episode it reminds me of how Marvel sometimes struggles with their villains, in that they set up a villain that has like a sympathetic cause, and then instead of having that villain like naturally kind of be their own downfall because their approach is wrong, they kind of go like way overboard. Like this idea that Gravik, who's doing all of this stuff so his people can have a homeworld, and some of it is out of his personal spite and anger towards Nick and humanity as a proxy, but like this idea that he's now going to just completely, he's going to threaten, and I guess the implication is that he's not really going to do it because he wants the powers, but with him like willy-nilly just killing that dude, and then him telling them like, oh, you guys are nameless and faceless, like for a people of shapeshifters, that has to be like a little bit like really taboo, you know, like so maybe don't point at that. I don't know, it was just very odd to me. Like I liked him before this, and in this episode it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna do whatever it takes, even if we have to sacrifice you guys, this is for the better of Skrulls and so our kids can have a home world, anything like that. He was just like, no, I'm the boss and you do what I say, and if you don't like it, I'm gonna stab you with a Groot arm. And I don't know, it just kind of really put a sour taste in my mouth.
Well, I have to agree on both points. I think that his turn was very surprising, and then also the uprising of the underlings. You know, I mean, I guess you can see that they would see him react like that, and you know, then be like, "Oh, I think we've got a problem here with this guy." But I didn't feel that coming in any of the earlier episodes. You know, that they're like, "Oh, maybe we should take this guy out," and you know, he's got superpowers, and I guess they thought a Ziploc over the head was going to take this guy out, and it didn't. But you know, it just didn't feel like we had gotten to that point in Gravik's story or the story of really any of the Skrulls that supported him and then decided to try and take him out. What did you think about this turn for Gravik and really his company, as it were, Eric?
I actually grabbed a pic of Gravik that, if you have access to it, Christian, it would help our video audience, albeit our audio audience will be left in the cold, wondering what
we usually leave the audio audience in the cold. That's okay.
Yeah, sorry guys. I apologize, wireless listeners.
So yeah, it's I see the one that you have. Yes. Sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my issue with Gravik, honestly, has been every episode he feels like he has a totally different voice, and I'm not talking like the sound of voice. I'm his character attitude, his approach. So here, if the pic comes up, if you scroll down, it's his dialogue here, which is, "Who wants it?" And so suddenly he's becoming Denzel Washington in Training Day, like, "I'm King Kong." Like, it just, this is not the guy from the first episode or two who was really kind of interesting. He was quiet, if you remember, in those first couple. He was unassuming. He was sort of working in the shadows. And that version of the character I found really intriguing. He's a good actor, and he definitely held the screen well without feeling the need to suddenly get into histrionics. And maybe taking that super serum gives you kind of side effects like steroids. I'm not sure, but his voice is not the same, and gets back to an issue I brought up previously. Like, it just doesn't feel like there's a captain at this ship. Like, every episode, the logic, like Nick Fury's character is all over the place. You made a great point. I think Olivia Colman's, I've been on board with Olivia Colman from the first second too. She was, every time she's in a scene, it is more interesting. And I think largely because she's more interesting as a character. She's the one, you're right, comes off like a spy. Remember the torture scene where she cut that guy's fingers off and they turned green? She's like, "Oh, good." Like, just for a moment, like, what if that was just some dude? She just and then this one with the shooting, and and even when she pulled the gun in that great little sort of standoff moment, and just like a badass, got the guy right in the head, didn't blink. I mean, she is terrific. She feels like should be the center of this show, because once again, Nick Fury, episode to episode, feels like a different guy also, just like Gravik. And I mean, I do like, speaking of pulls from other movies, I'm glad he found his jacket from Shaft. in that last scene. Because when he put it on,
Yes.
I was totally expecting to hear some Isaac Hayes on the soundtrack.
Oh my gosh. Well, you
Because
want to
it
go over
totally
budget.
was. Yeah, well,
Well,
why
because you
not?
brought that up, Erica, Kame Egan mentioned something that I did notice. Did anyone notice when Nick's at the cemetery, the icons on the headstone and in the crypt look like Black Panthers? I did notice a little bit, sort of the basically like basically the ears, the points on the mask. So maybe it's just so that we could understand that it was Wakandan technology. Craig says I saw they looked a different language, but that's a good pull. Daniel says, didn't notice that. I was just remembering one of the other Grace Winter Soldier. I thought that was a good line. It was clearly important to be like, you got a few of these, don't you? He's like, yeah, you got to be buried in a bunch of different places because it's not the one from Winter Soldier. To circle back, Johnny Beck in the chat. Thank you, Johnny Beck. There was a moment before that scene when Gravik and company returned to New Skrullos where the other Skrulls didn't show the usual reverence in his return, which was noticeable. I do agree with that. And then Johnny adds, they definitely could have foreshadowed the unrest more. Yeah, I think just go back even one episode where we're
and on
starting
that
to
end,
feel that.
have one character that we know who's an underling that we sort of track with them for a couple episodes as well. Like we don't really have that.
Yeah, there's that one
should have
character
been
who we've
Gaia.
sort of. What's that? Oh, should have been
It should
Gaia.
have been
Yeah,
Gaia.
actually.
Gaia has
Yeah.
no purpose in this show other than
Right.
like, oh, my dad died, and then to serve as motivation for Talos to go against Gravik outside of like the obvious.
The thing that drove me nuts with that, but I'm sorry for cutting you out.
No, go ahead.
I need help burying my father, and all they did was set his ass on fire. It's like I could help you with that. Like I saw Return of the Jedi. I know
No,
I learned how to do
she
a
needs
funeral
someone who
pyre
can
since
say
age
the
9.
words, the magic scroll words.
Magic scroll words. Yeah.
You can't look that up.
I feel like
Cam-
the character.
what-
Oh, go ahead.
Well, you think that's on like Scroll Google, Eric? I think somebody has to know it.
I
don't
have
think you
I
can
have
just
the
look it
Scroll
up.
app,
What?
part of the
Scroogle.
Meta family.
What were you going to say, Nate?
I just like one more episode and a couple minutes in each of these episodes, and you could have a fantastic subplot. And Gaia is already the perfect character because she starts off enmeshed in this kind of double agent position. And if we didn't know, as like for a majority of the show, if she was really with Gravik or if she was working as a counteragent for Talos, and she's like kind of working to undermine Gravik and like trying to bring because in the beginning Gravik, when he executes that one guy for failing him, he does it like out, like away from people where people can't see it, and then comes back. Whereas here he's now just killing them right in front of them. And you very easily could have built that into a subplot of Gaia like bringing attention of how he's really operating and how he's kind of losing it to some of his other underlings and lieutenants to kind of get this revolt, which we end up seeing, and have it mean more for Gaia, for the Skrulls that live there, for Gravik himself. But instead it's just this literally like there's hints of it, and obviously like a normal person would get frustrated and be like, what's going on, this is weird, from episodes ago. But for them to go like right from the okay, he snapped and he killed this dude, and then what is it, like 8 minutes later, now they've decided, you know what, that guy that we saw that has the powers that none of us have and has been leading this whole thing and ruthlessly killing people, like, you know what, I'm gonna try to put a plastic bag over his head. Like,
yeah,
remember they did that with Nick. They also put a bag over his head. It's like one of those 2-cent ways to like get a stunt guy into the mix, but with a plastic,
that's a great point.
You could still sort of see it, but it does obscure it a little.
It's also like 4 guys took him on. Like if it was like 20, you'd be like, all right, clearly we have a chance. By the way,
like they don't have
Craig gives us the
weapons
term
there?
Scrollopedia instead of Scroll Google. So thank you, Craig.
I like that.
What were you going to say, Nate? Sorry.
I'm saying they have guns. They've got guns, and speaking of guns, why did Homegirl have to go to the bank safety deposit box to get a gun to kill Nick Fury when she's got the whole Call of Duty arsenal in her garage? Make that make sense, because I'm confused.
Oh my god! Or she's just waiting there to be killed, but the second they show up, she runs and shoots.
She goes full John Wick, and then leaves.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, if that was your plan, was when they show up, then I'll run. Have an idea. Take your guns and run now. Like, why wait for them? Besides, it's fun killing people, I guess.
I think the reason is a very simple, real world reason, because they hadn't written this episode yet. It was just like, and they spent $212 million, but what they didn't do is spent an extra million and go back and add some scenes that could be a through line. And we were talking about Emilia Clarke. Cammie Egan says, I love Emilia Clarke, but she has little to no scenes, dialogue, or point to her character. I'm trying to not bring my baggage about her as an actress and other things I've seen her in, but I don't know that she serves much purpose. Clearly, she's going to in the next episode. And let's talk about Talos. I really didn't think he was dead. I mean, until they lit him on fire, I'm like, oh, okay. So that okay. So I just kept thinking like, all right, maybe he took some Skrull serum or something. No, he's dead. Then that makes his death, the actual death in episode 4. Like, I felt like it wasn't significant enough, but I also was like, well, he'll be back next week. Oh, he's actually dead. And that was not a great there's not a great death scene. I mean, unless next week we find out they burned some other Skrull. But I don't feel like that's it. I don't know, Nate. We talked about this last week. Were you surprised that Talos is actually dead?
I mean, I not really. Like, with the way the show is going, not really, because it would have added extra time and plot and writing required if he survived. And so with the way that the show's been going, I assumed that they would take that easy route of him just being dead.
Yeah.
It's kind of a bummer, I think, for that character who has kind of been around for a while and involved in a lot of things. It's kind of a crappy way to go. Very similar to Maria Hill. But yeah, there's just so much stuff that they would have had to like develop if he lived, and they're not doing. This is not the show for that. They're not doing that. They're very loosely trying to introduce you more. They're reminding you the Skrulls exist and that they work with Nick Fury, so that when you see the Marvels and the Skrulls are there with Nick Fury, we're like, oh, I know those guys. That's the whole vibe I'm getting from this show.
Yeah, I think that this show gives off a distinctive 10-page research paper is due at noon. It's 11 o'clock. You're on page 9.5, and you're like almost done. You're just like, can we just push through, get to the end of this? When can I start using some footnotes and putting some other things in there? Cammie Egan, Talos' death was reminiscent of Game of Thrones, foreshadowing of Emilia Clarke dying in Game. Hey, spoiler! No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I know that was a number of years ago, but also Cammie Egan agrees with Nate. Thought the same thing. I mean, this Gaia character, there's a place for her in this story, and they just didn't put her in it. And it's almost like they didn't get to this part. I don't know. I mean, I know enough about writers' rooms that you're supposed to map out the whole season. And this is only 6 episodes. You're not like, oh man, we got to episode 18 and we came up with an idea for episode 14 and it's too late. No, and this was done. I don't even know how long ago this was done. I think that these are easy fixes that they could have made. I don't think this show was ever going to be great. They could have made a much better show than the one that we're getting. What do you think, Eric? Were you like me, just expecting Talos would be back? And how do you think that they handled the departure of one of the leads of this series?
Well, Talos's death, I did think he did die, because if he didn't, it would have just literally been the same thing that they did with Emilia Clarke. So
fair.
It was a real external logic I had for thinking he was dead. I think what we're seeing here, honestly, is a lot of sort of bandages, a lot of triage. So what you're describing, Christian's totally right. Like a writer's room, you go into a writer's room, even if it's like only an episode into the season in terms of production, and you look around the walls and basically you see the whole season 3-dimensionally. Like it's all around you basically, because they've broken it all. And yeah, of course, they'll go back and change things as the season progresses in some cases. But here it feels like we're watching a show. And once again, the budget thing sort of speaks to this, that maybe it was just like they rewrote a ton of it. They reshot a ton of it. They got actors, lost actors. Ben Mendelsohn is in demand. I imagine they only had him for a finite period of time. Maybe the reshoots interfered or something. Like, I think like what it feels like we're looking at is attempts to fix mistakes instead of attempts of deepening stories. Explaining away things with a hastily written sentence at best. And so the result is like there is not a very strong build to this. The last scene of the episode's kind of fun in a fan service type of way of like, Nick Fury getting his old coat on, the eye patch. For some reason, he's putting that back on, unless there's some sort of magic beans in that eye patch. I'm not sure why he needs it. But then also, it's setting up a pretty cool showdown potentially. And definitely it's very personal now for Nick. But even one of the slides I grabbed for you, Christian, it's like his whole attitude is unclear. And it wasn't unclear in that, like, the first episode, I was game on for this thing. I really enjoyed that first episode more than you guys did.
Yeah,
but
that was funny.
Then, Nick, yeah,
that was funny.
Me and Michael suddenly it's like we shared one mind for 1 week, and that the darkness I saw in that mind.
Yeah, no, I know.
It was both a cloak and a dagger for me. But I just think like the Nick Fury from that episode, every week since then, it's been like ping ponging. None of them can defend the world the way I can. That makes no sense. Because guess what? Thor can defend our world better than him. Captain America, Iron Man, Iron Man's daughter, all of them can defend the world better than him because
Daredevil.
they're daredevils. Wendy Marvin from the DC Super Friends.
Kamala Khan on day one. She could shoot lasers out of her arms. All stuff that Fury can't do. And Daniel, I know we all keep saying this. This should have been a very expensive big event. 12 episode, I don't know. I think, but big event.
Or go the opposite way and make it 6 episodes, but very small and intimate, actual espionage spy thing. And do that, but it's like in this weird in between place, and I think this really speaks to, unfortunately, like this is the reality of Marvel content now. There is that like this slate they have of things and everything that's supposed to connect, but that slate's not solid. It's constantly changing, and timelines are changing, and casting changes, and directing changes, and so they're making stuff that's supposed to go along with stuff that's not set yet. So when they shoot it, when they make it, they get coverage of everything, they get different angles and reaction shots of everything, so they can recut stuff later to like make stuff make sense to how things have changed. But that leaves you with a product that doesn't have a clear vision. Like that's not how movies and TV shows are supposed to be made. Even the comic books that they're taken from, that's not how they're made. Like even when they have crossover events, you have one person leading this story, right? And then even the people that have little tie-ins, those writers have their story that they're telling, and you have a complete picture. And we're getting this kind of like a hodgepodge of like characters that exist and tie-ins to other things that exist. And like that last episode really felt like they were like, all right, cool, this way when we actually get to writing the next one, then we can decide if Talos actually lived or if he died, right? Like the way that it's, and I don't know if that's maybe just the way that they cut it because of what they cut out or left on the floor, but like it does feel, it's not a satisfying death, because in that episode, the ending makes it feel like you're supposed to wonder if he's alive or dead. And then the way that they address it in this episode doesn't recognize that at all. It's just like, yeah, duh, of course he's dead. You saw him die. Why wouldn't you? Like it's insulting to the viewer, especially for, people like us that watch these shows and these universes to like kind of get deeper into them and have the character reactions and kind of theorize about what's coming next. And it's just hard to theorize when like the people who are making it don't know what's coming next.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that Daniel Drew says this really well. It was actually a thought I had watching this episode. It almost feels like this show was written during a writer's strike, even though clearly it wasn't. It was written quite some time before. And it's almost like, oh, well, we can't go back and fix anything. And look, I think that, if you were to have an honest conversation with people who worked on this, you'd probably find some of the limitations there were. There's probably a timeline where they need this to come out. I mean, if you remember, the Marvels was supposed to come out in
summer,
like this week, actually, or next week. It was supposed to come out at the end of June. you know. So but when that moved, I guess you could have given them some more money, but I think at that point they felt like this is just going to be what it is. Johnny Beck in the chat making a point that I hadn't thought of. They mentioned the human beings being kept at New Skrullos in this episode. Made me wonder how they're protecting those from the radiation exposure. Johnny, not only did I not think about that, I feel like nobody that wrote the show thought about that.
There is no radiation. There is no dirty bomb.
Everyone living there looks like the guy from RoboCop before he got flattened by that car. Everyone just like.
I wish, but they would do that in CGI now, and it wouldn't look nearly as good as the practical. I know that
one of my favorite practical gore effects ever might be his explosion. But
and Daniel, thank you for reminding me. I like the Black Widow character cameo. That's the guy on the plane with Fury. And basically in Black Widow, he gives her a bunch of supplies and basically provides a plane. So nice to see he's still in that business. If you need a plane, I'm your guy. I mean, you could have had somebody else do it, but I'm just going to assume this guy was more affordable, than a few of those. And apparently Daniel says Gravik mentioned the pills. I assume they just do that with all the humans. So, Daniel, I think this show should have been delayed to be improved. I think you're not going to find anybody that feels like this came out to market, as it were, at the appropriate time. It's like I was saying earlier, I think that there are tools here where they could have made a much better show. I think that the resources allocated in terms of actors and budget and all of that, this wasn't going to be the great show. But really small, behind the scenes, underground kind of story would have suited it. But it's like, well, we want to do something big, but we don't have that much money, so I don't know.
They do though. They just
no, they do, but what I mean,
Bob Iger has the money.
Bob Iger's got that money spread out over the next 2 years. But when they were given their budget, it was like, well, this is what it's going to be. I agree. Yes, the money is there. But apparently it's in the banana stand. I'm not quite sure where the money actually went to in this case. Eric, I know that one of the images you sent to me is from the very beginning of the episode. So let's circle back to, I refuse to Google whether it's Dylan McDermott or Dermot Mulroney. I actually know which one it is, but
I do too.
I'm like, you ruined it. All right.
No, for our wireless listeners at home.
Our wireless listeners. So we send this out on shortwave after we're done. And, if you want to catch us on Ship to Shore Communications, you can find the Geekscape channel there at the correct frequency. We get a little bit of interaction. I want to talk about Rhodey because that ties into this, but what was it about this moment that spoke to you? Is it the extra playing the role of the nurse?
No, that she seemed fine, but once again, and I don't know if you have access to the follow-up slide from The Simpsons, but
I do. I do.
You are my hero every day.
No.
This the idea. This is the president of the United States. Remember what happened when Reagan got shot?
Sorry, I thought I had it. I do have it. When Reagan got shot, yeah.
Just tons of people swarming, people jumping at the gunman. It was chaos. Tons of people in the hospital.
A guy threw a shoe at George W. Bush's head, and there was like a SWAT team descended on him.
So it harkened back to this image from The Simpsons from the movie Homer Simpson was watching in preparation of going back to college, where it's two people walk in. It's like an 80s sex comedy. As you know, I am the president of the United States. It has that feeling of just like there is nothing presidential about this guy most of the time. Like the people that follow him, I feel like the Kardashians have more people following them. And when they go out shopping at Trader Joe's, this is one of those budget things where we're supposed to believe a character's the president. But I never, and it's not about the actor. The actor's great. Look for him in my friend's movie that's coming out pretty soon. But in the end of it all, it's like they have not put a cent towards the actual production value of what it means to have a character of that
Yeah.
stature.
Yeah, no, I'm convinced that the detail that surrounds the president of the United States, Britney Spears could walk right up and not get punched in the face. I think that there would be no problems with that. I think she'd be right there.
I rolled my eyes so hard with Nick's dramatic chair flip.
Yeah.
To like sitting, I guess I'll do it. I'll protect the president by myself.
And then, by the way, he's not there the next time we see that corridor. Daniel Drew, I enjoyed the line that Scrody. I don't know how often I want to say that, but Scroll Rhodey said when the nurse pointed to where the president was, is like, yeah, we're just telling anybody where the president is. But that was a nice moment. Every interaction. Well, the first time we just thought he was a Skrull, but so the last episode, Scroll Rhodey gets drunk, and there's a scene with him and Nick. This one, there's, how many times are guns pointed at Nick Fury where people don't shoot him and we don't see how it's like, oh boy, how's Fury going to get out of this? Does he have like a smoke bomb? Does he? No, I'm just going to walk out the door. Really?
They had him dead to rights. I mean, like they had a dozen guns pointed at him. He's been released as the killer of Kobe Smulders, and yet they had a perfect excuse to kill him, and they're like, all right, problem solved. Why they did not shoot him? And again, I know it's a James Bond thing, and it's suspension of disbelief. We want to hear Spectre do the whole Blofeld do the whole speech, so we understand what's going on. But even with all of that, the idea that they didn't try to shoot him was absurd.
Or at least he takes out one of the guys and does something. But yeah, Johnny is right. We haven't seen him doing anything presidential. Yeah, I guess they could have made him a senator, but I think the stakes I understand why this is the president, but it just doesn't come off presidential,
As I am the county executive of Newcastle, Delaware.
Well, that does sound impressive. Yeah, I mean, did Fury just know that? Did Fury just know that? Depending on where you get your news from, did Fury know that the United States military ran out of bullets? So he knew that they couldn't shoot him. So he just walked away. He's like, "You can point that gun at me, but I know there's nothing in there."
And when he pistol whipped him, but ever so lightly, it was like he's like, not so hard.
It's Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. My hair, he hits my hair.
I spent a long time in my hair, and he hits it.
It would not be hard. Okay, real quick, easy. You redo that scene where Nick points the gun at him, but he never actually touches him. Then later reveal the end of the scene. Oh, it's not actually Nick. It was a hologram. He was just tricking you because he's 3 steps ahead of you. Like, it's dumb, but it's way cooler than him just like turning around and walking away. Like, here's my big plan as Nick Fury. I plan everything. I'm going to hold my gun up to this scroll where, any reasonable person knows that the building's going to be swarming with, it should be, not that we have seen it before, but really invisible, like Secret Service.
Swarm on a budget. By swarm, they mean a couple of them.
Yeah,
they have those. They're actually hiding in the walls. That's why we can't see them. They're really advanced.
Yeah, there's 2 ways to handle this. I agree with Daniel. That scene should have been like the elevator scene from Winter Soldier, where Fury takes them all out, or a hologram. Hologram is a more likely way out, I think. And it's like we were saying before. Johnny's pointing out Olivia Colman knows where it's at. Shooting the guy in the leg, despite guns being pointed at her. Yeah, I mean, if you look, here's the quick fix with that. If Nick knows that the detail around Rhodey are all also Skrulls, so outing him as a Skrull isn't going to accomplish anything. It's still not a well-constructed scene. It's not well written, but then there's like, we've given you at least one piece of logic where it makes sense, but there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense. I can't imagine ever rewatching this show, but knowing where it's going and where it's not going, it would be so much more infuriating to start over, like to
The
watch all
whole
5 before next week's finale. What were you going to say, Nate?
the whole reason why Fury doesn't kill Skrull Rhodey or out Skrull Rhodey in that scene where he reveals himself as a Skrull is because he's like, oh, I have this leverage of you, right? Or I'm going to release this thing. Then he says, oh, by the way, I already released it. Okay, bam. Cool. I'm on the run either way. Why am I going to let you live too? Like, come on. It makes no sense. It makes
But
absolutely no sense.
but Nate, he was in a rush to get back to the safe house because if you remember last week, we got to see a conversation where Fury discussed poetry. Well, this week we had a conversation where he discussed art, the mural on the wall behind him, gave a little history lesson. So I think if this show were called Nick Fury's Appreciation of the Arts, then maybe we would have a different expectation for what
Bob
they
Ross
would
meets
be delivering.
Marvel.
Yeah. I mean, something.
Nick Fury is Bob Ross, by the way. Please don't steal that idea. I think that's the logical next place to take him in this.
Yeah, you know what? I realize now that the Photoshop seems to have slowed down a little bit. Did your family come home? Do you have people to pay attention to you again?
They came home doesn't mean they pay attention to me.
Okay, that's also fair.
I have one more thing that really ticked me off.
Oh,
Okay.
I can't wait.
In this same episode, Olivia Colman's character, right, shoots that dude in the leg.
Yeah.
And then it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, look, his leg turned green because he got shot. Yet Gravik like slits that dude's throat, stabs that dude in the head, shoots the one guy, and then at no point do any of the bodies that get dropped in that scene turn green. Not one. You there's a shot of him going, who wants it? And in the background, there's a bunch of human bodies. Like nobody turned green. You did this. You wrote this into the episode. That one character shoots someone, not even dead, and he turns green. Like
Nate, you know what? If you had one person off camera, just go, "Oh my God, he's turning green."
Yeah. How about the sound effect that like a shapeshift sound effect? And
I mean, just
like
put
a
a
close
green
up
wash in the color
Yeah.
grading over the film at least, and like do something.
Put a filter in front of one of those lights.
Yeah, just a ring light with like a green gel in front of it, like on his face.
Oh,
Kevin Egan, by the way, talking about Olivia Colman, is terrifyingly fantastic in this role. And Craig said this earlier. I loved her scenes, but suspected at the end when she was asking so many questions that she might be Gravik. Yeah, I thought that was a possibility. You know, just like, well, anybody could be a Skrull, and then it could have been like, even me. But we don't have any money for me to shapeshift, so it's
well,
just
I don't know
me.
if you guys watched Killing Eve, but she, Fiona Shaw in Killing Eve, similar kind of character in terms of like a badass female who's totally in control. Olivia Colman like totally reminds me of her, but with like that warmth that Olivia Colman also somehow brings. Like she actually seems like someone you'd really like to go have a drink with. Like she just seems cool. And then yet is a complete badass, a good leader. She's all these things to the point where I hope at some point they do give her her own spy show. Not necessarily as this character, but just some variation.
No, just a spot. Yeah, I think.
Oh my God, she's terrific.
I agree.
But the one thing I said was one thing I wanted to bring up before we wrap. Was
well, I regret not bringing this up earlier, by the way, because we talked about it so much. Consider this a preview, Nick.
Preview is "We'll Let You Live."
Yeah,
3 guys pointing a gun at me. Okay, yeah, I sure. Okay, thanks, fake Rhodey.
Cake or death, Johnny. I took the Eddie Izzard reference. I was all over that. Cake or death. Cake, please.
Yeah. I saw that. So I brought it up and it went away. Wow, Johnny keeps disappearing. Cake or death. The Eddie Izzard reference.
Death. I mean, cake.
Cam Egan has a great question. Maybe he's in a rush to get a Royale with cheese. That's true. I mean,
no, I was going to say one last thing. I want the Avengers in liquid form. That was one thing I sent you also, where it's like we cleaned up the DNA and we put in this little vial. instead of, I don't know, destroying it so no one could get their hands on it.
Well,
Also,
no,
all their DNA is just like mixed together. Like,
yeah.
And it gave me vibes of another superhero story. So yes, the
Well, yeah. So I
perfume.
agree, Nate. The idea that you would take them and maybe not separate all of them and make sure that Thor doesn't mix with Carol Danvers and especially like you don't want Banner's DNA. I mean, there's a whole plot line in She-Hulk about getting some of that She-Hulk DNA, you know. So you found it hard to believe that that vial contained basically the superpowers of all the Avengers, Nate.
it was also the most strangely shaped vial I've ever seen. Too, like, I'm just who is working on this show? Like,
I'm
really?
going to
Like,
RoboCop
I would
2.
very you could have made it a USB stick.
Right.
And then, like, it's like, okay, it has the information to access
Yeah,
the hard
and we can
drive of the
synthesize
DNA
it.
stuff or
Or
something.
at least
Like,
a cool looking canister that looks
Or
like
maybe it
I'm
could
looking
just
at
be
RoboCop 2.
diabolical.
Yes, that's what I kept thinking of. Batman 1966, when all of the UN got turned into powder
Sand.
form,
Yeah.
and then they put them back. They add water to hydrate them, and they all got mixed up and started speaking each other's languages. I completely thought of that when I was watching this ridiculousness with the
Yeah.
the
Daniel
Avengers
says,
now
I
in
thought he could have
space
had
form.
one vial of each Avenger in each of his gravestones. And
Of
yeah, I
course.
mean, I think if they wanted to have a montage of him flying around, you would think he would keep them all separate for a variety of reasons. Johnny Beck, a can of shaving foam with concealed storage for numerous different vials would have been more apropos. I definitely agree 100% that it's, and just the ease with which she's like, oh yeah, I got this now. The only way that this works for me is if that vials actually does something else. You know, it's like actually not all the
It's a
Avengers
long
DNA.
con. It's like just poison, and so
Yeah,
but
he's like, yeah, go ahead and inject this. It's green. Obviously, it's totally ecto cooler. Just enjoy. Go and put a straw in it.
that's one of those kinds of ideas that like it's you know, the in writing terms, and then versus therefore, where you always strive for therefore, meaning there's a logic connection, right? That feels like an and then. That feels like, well, what if it's the DNA one here? What if it's the DNA of a bunch of them and it's in liquid form? Yeah, what? And then he hid it in one of his tombstones. Like, it doesn't make any dramatic sense. There's no logic for having that. There's no logic for hiding that. Like, if they're that worried about their DNA of these superheroes getting in the wrong hands, then destroy it. Like this, and again, I know we're spending an hour talking about a show that was 34 minutes long before
Yes.
titles, but yet such a swing and a miss on this thing, or maybe not even a swing. Maybe that's the biggest problem of all. They bumped it.
They were hoping for the bases loaded not intentional, but the bases loaded walk to end the game. They're
Yeah,
just
hit
like,
by
let's
pitch.
just hope.
yeah, it's a
let's
swing
not
and a
swing.
miss,
Yeah.
but they're playing soccer. Is like what's happening. Like,
Oh, I don't usually use that on
Ring the
this
bell.
show, but
Ring the bell.
oh my gosh, you get the bell. If I had a train whistle, I'd use that too. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, 1 week from today, at this very moment, we'll have finished talking about episode 6. We'll have finished talking about Secret Invasion. And honestly, I'm more looking forward to the episode we're going to do a week after that, something that we've been promising for a while, but we'll tease that. We'll tease that next week. But Nate, what do you think we're going to get next week? What do you think we're going to be talking about? How happy we were and how we were wrong the whole time. And it was all worth it. All the shortcomings, all the disappointments. Wow, they really pulled it off. Good work, Feige. Does that seem likely to you, Nate?
It doesn't seem likely. I would not be upset if that happened. You know, that I would be very, very pleasantly surprised. I feel like it's definitely we're going to see a lot of that huge budget that they apparently had, more so in that episode.
Yeah, Daniel
honestly,
says somehow the money ran out by episode 2, since it may all be in episode 6.
Yeah.
Also adding, by the way, the finale better be 50 minutes of content. I mean, I feel that way, but don't hold your breath. Finish your thoughts. Sorry,
I'll
Nate.
take that bet.
I would really, I just want a satisfying conclusion to this kind of story, which they haven't really worked on at all. And I don't want something that is literally just a feed into like Miss Marvel. Like if Gravik ends up like getting the powers and becomes like this big super skull, and then he like leaves the planet for some reason to go look for another planet, and like that's how we find out that like that's the plot of Miss Marvel, is that they're fighting a super scroll or something like that, like I'm gonna be pretty bummed. I'm hoping just for, you know, a nice cheesy battle between Nick Fury and Gravik, which should last like all of 3 milliseconds, but of course will last like 5 minutes as he diatribes and tells him about his plan. And then Nick is gonna like flip a switch or something, and then Gaia's gonna come in out of nowhere after being missing for the whole show and like have some plot purpose, which is why they wrote her into the series anyways, even though she doesn't organically fit in there. I don't know. I don't know. I just want more Super Scroll stuff. If we get a legitimately cool Super Scroll villain and or anti-hero from this, then it will at least be somewhat worth it to me. I'm still
Right.
not going to recommend anybody watch it, but if there's something that adds to, right now nothing in this show for me has added to the Marvel universe, and I had
Right.
hoped that we would like getting more scrolls would do that, but the scrolls feel very anecdotal and not like, they're used more so as this like metaphor for immigration and less more as like straight up aliens that are infiltrating, you know, and have this different culture and stuff. And I think a lot of that has to do with so many of the scenes that are just scrolls, that they're humans because of budget, right? Like it just costs a lot to have a room full of scrolls and just a scene where they're just talking to each other. But in terms of portraying that vibe of and different species invading a planet and having these ulterior motives and their own plans and stuff, like you lose so much of that without that visual representation. So if we can get something, some type of character, like if Gravik can become like something we see later on in the movies or in another show or something, like that for me will be at least like somewhat cool.
Yeah, and there's an exchange in you know, in the Fury graveyard about you know, hey, why don't you call any of your friends? And that's that whole point about how he has to protect the Earth better than them. But that is, of course, one of those obvious moments where the first thought in my head was, well, we can't afford any of them, so instead we're going to handle it ourselves. Do you think, what percent chance would you give it that we see? I'm just going to say any costumed character, any superhero, does not have to be an actual Avenger. Do you think that we'll see any established super character in episode 6 of this series, Nate?
I'm gonna say there's a 5% chance, just because we do know that this directly ties into Miss Marvel. I don't
Right.
think we see I don't know, but he also like expressly in this episode was like, yeah, we don't have the budget for superheroes, so I'm gonna handle this myself because it's my problem. So I don't know. Like the most I see us getting is like Spectrum, because
Yeah, I was
she
going to
would
say, if we
be,
get anybody, it's Monica Rambeau. Yeah, it's totally
yeah,
Spectrum. I agree.
because it's kind of like a midway. She's been on the shows before. She's not quite a movie Avengers hero, but she does have some powers, and she's related to Nick Fury. So it would kind of like make sense. She's in that world, that sword world, and that would also again help feed into the movie plots. But I still think that that is a pretty low. It just kind of takes away from this whole, I mean, not that they're following through with any throughput themes, but it takes away from this whole idea of that like Nick is responsible for this problem, so he feels like he has to handle it himself in solving it. It would kind of totally take away from that.
Daniel says something that I think a lot of us have been feeling over the last month. I had such high hopes for this show, and I don't hate this show. Well, we can agree to disagree. It's enjoyable. Again, agree to disagree. I wish it could have been better. No, I think that as it's gone along, I've been more annoyed because you see at least some degree of potential. So, Eric, your thoughts. Let's kind of work backwards. Let's start with if you think we're going to have any superpowered characters at any point in episode 6, and what you think we'll actually get from the finale of this series.
I'm going to answer the second part first as Michael Shirley, which is, what do I expect to get from this last episode? Disappointment. Because that's exactly how he put it. Yeah,
You get nothing.
you get nothing, and you'll like it. I think we will get a with all due respect, a B team costume hero in this. Someone affordable.
Well,
powers of the gods.
Spectrum is the front runner.
Spectrum, right? Spectrum, DirecTV, any of the sort of TV branding. Thank you. It was a smaller bell. I agree.
But yeah, I think that. By the way, I think that if we get anyone, it's like a post-credit scene setting up the Marvels. I think it's like, sorry, I wasn't able to help you with the thing that I could have definitely helped with. Johnny Beck wondering, interesting to see if Guy will be kept around. Does she have the same Super Skrull powers as Gravik or just the Extremis? I guess we'll see. And Cammy Egan, as Eric summarizes his thoughts for what we're going to get. This goes back to the point from last week. It was Eric's point. Where's the true invasion? I don't know, cutting room floor, on the page. A big red X went through the invasion sequences. It's there's secrets in this, but it's only half false advertising. There's
more of a mild infection than a full-on invasion, unfortunately.
Right, exactly. So what else do you think we'll get next week, Eric?
I mean, I think we will see some of that money. Ironic, you think about, going back to one of the first shows of which was, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and where they spent all that money on that first episode.
Yeah.
That really terrific scene involving the plane, which set up this beautiful sort of like expectation for what Disney TV would look, Marvel's MCU's TV branch would look like, which it didn't really follow through on. This one didn't have any pretensions of trying to do that with its first couple episodes, with, of course, the dirty bomb that was not very dirty, not very bomb at all. And so I think there might be a little bit more of a pop in this last episode.
It's a very Linda Richman on Coffee Talk from SNL. Your dirty bomb is neither dirty nor a bomb. Discuss amongst yourselves. Daniel asked a great question. What about the 1 million plus Skrulls? Will they be in the finale? No, maybe like 6 of them.
On the other side of that wall is 1 million Skrulls waiting to take over this town. I'm not sure which character that is, but yeah, I think it will be a pretty fun shoot 'em up. But the action directing of this last episode, I did enjoy.
The action sequences, yeah. I mean, there's we touched on it, how we didn't necessarily need that scene with Gaia and Fury's wife, but there was some decent action, some faceless, nameless characters who got shot, and it's like there's these moments where they're like, oh, people probably would like to see some gunplay and a couple of corpses, so let's toss that in here. But that's about all we get. So in any case, I guess we're all done. And we will see next week. Eric, I know you got to go, but where can people keep in touch with you?
You can find me at Count Eric Connor over at Twitter and Instagram. I started a Threads account. I still don't understand what it is yet, so find me somewhere else. Absolutely.
Well, Eric, thank you. We will see you next week.
You bet.
And then until then, I'm really bad with the private chat, Nate. It's almost like you need to like hold up signs and tell me stuff like gotta go.
I just saw it right now too.
Yeah, no, we're going to go. But the final point I wanted to bring this in, Daniel, is kind of what we've been talking about. How much rewriting happened in this show? Like when it was going to be a movie, what was the plot going to be? Or the first version of this show's plot before? And I would love to know that. We'll never know because I think they want us all to forget about it. One of the things that I know that we should do is reevaluate our rankings of all these Disney Plus series, because there were series that I know people didn't like. And now we have this one. I'm going to reserve judgment, but I'm fairly sure this is my least favorite of all of them. And I think that
It does
Nate, I
not
think you
bode
didn't watch.
well.
I think you didn't watch Ms. Marvel all the way through, but
No.
I feel like apart from that, you're probably a little bit underwhelmed by this one.
The couple episodes I got into Miss Marvel, I didn't think it was bad. I just didn't think it was for me. I didn't really enjoy it, but it did not immediately have the glaring issues that like the first
Yeah.
episode of this show has, let alone the rest of them. This does
No, it's
not bode well for Phase 5. Like it just
No.
it's not a great foot to start on. I think we have Loki next, so season 2, which was my favorite of the first round shows. So if they tank that too, I might just not watch the rest of these shows because I
Yeah.
am not interested in Echo really. Ironheart, I could kind of like give or take. The Agatha show, I don't care about at all. Daredevil, I'm excited for, but that's I don't know, like with the 4 shows in between now and then, my excitement for that may wane, you know. That Daredevil show, I was reading that first season they did that, it was like 56 million was the budget for that. And granted that was a couple years ago, but like for them to do that on Netflix with that low budget and then now here like I don't know, I'm concerned about the helm of the TV shows and stuff and like what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think that you have Bob Iger coming back and definitely tightening the reins a little bit on Feige because Feige was left to do whatever you think is best because there was nothing but successes. But I think that maybe everyone underestimated what it was going to be like after Endgame, in terms of, and obviously the pandemic derailed where they were going and when they were planning on getting there. But at the same time, we would have gotten the same movies and the same shows just in a different order.
The fatigue was just naturally going to set in.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So I'll be interested in seeing next week and sharing it with everyone. And Johnny Beck, I hadn't seen you in the chat before, so glad you enjoyed it. And please look for us next week. Echo, Ironheart, Agatha, and Iron Wars just don't grab. Yeah, I think that those are more like I'm interested, but I agree with you, Nate, that Loki's the one where I'm like, oh yeah, that I really enjoyed, and I feel like it'll be more substantial. But anyway, we will be back next Wednesday at 2 Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, right here on Geekscape, talking about the finale of Secret Invasion. And we'll take our time and we'll do our best to let everybody know about what we thought. But until then, Nate, where can people find you?
Twitter, Instagram, Threads, MySpace, Dog Like Nate with 2 G's.
Did you ever have a Friendster?
I did have a Friendster. I never really used it though. I kind of joined and then gave up on it pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's like me with Threads right now. But anyway, I'm still there. Threads, Twitter, Instagram at Christian DMZ. Find my personal podcast, The Blackcast, BLADTCAST. We did a special episode last week on Indiana Jones, and we've kind of hit most of the summer movies thus far. And we'll be doing one for Oppenheimer in the weeks ahead, just as soon as I see it. So keep an eye out for that. And we will see you next time. And as the great Stan Lee and Cam Egan would say, Excelsior!